Take it away, Cameron.
Yep, thank you. Can you guys see this all right?
Yep.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I wanted to start off by giving a big thank you to EntreEd and Toy and her team for organizing such a great day full of informative sessions. This session is on hobby to high growth entrepreneurship, nurturing future innovators. So I'm here today representing the EdVenture group, as Toy mentioned, where Amber works as well, which is a nonprofit located in Morgantown, West Virginia, focusing on education consulting across Appalachia and the nation. So our core values are integrity, empathy, quality, community, and they really help to drive our visionary educational programs across communities in the United States. So a little bit about me. My name is Cameron Keefe, but everybody calls me Cam, and I am a program coordinator with the EdVenture group. I focus mainly on our entrepreneurship, innovation, STEM, leadership, and workforce development programs. A little about my backstory. During my undergrad, I founded my own business, and I really fell in love with the entrepreneurial space and education, and that's kind of what brought me here today in my different passions. So today we will be learning about entrepreneurial education, the essential skill sets, and then discovering how they align with our inspirations and identifications so that we can really gain a practical insight and scaling into entrepreneurial ventures. And then we're going to look a little bit into how to highlight local talent through different case studies and different success stories. And of course, we're going to end today by sharing some resources. So we're going to start this session off. We really want to ask, why should we prioritize entrepreneurial education? The top skill sets that students really need to enter the workforce and be successful, identified by HR and hiring managers across the nation, were analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, complex problem solving, critical thinking analysis, creativity, originality, and initiative. And I'm sure you guys can definitely relate to all these different skill sets. So before we get too carried away, I wanted to kind of clarify a couple definitions. An entrepreneur is an individual who creates a new business, bearing most of the risks and enjoying most of the rewards. And entrepreneurship is when an individual that has an idea acts upon that idea, usually to disrupt a current market with a new product or service. So when we talk about entrepreneurial education, we want to kind of note the similarities and differences between general business education and entrepreneurship. So general business focuses on the comprehensive understanding of various business areas and kind of broad skill sets across different industries, where we want to prepare our students to pursue all sorts of diverse career paths. Entrepreneurship education focuses on starting and managing new ventures, kind of emphasizing that creativity and innovation and preparing students for startups and leadership roles across different spaces. So both general business and entrepreneurship teach essential life and work skills, that creativity, innovation. They teach operations and management and different styles and jobs. And it really allows students to gain knowledge about future careers, regardless of the path or industry that they choose. So a lot of times when we discuss entrepreneurial education, and I know a couple sessions today even brought this up as well, we talk about the entrepreneurial mindset. The Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or as we like to call it, NIFTY, defines entrepreneurial mindset as a set of skills that enable people to identify and make the most of opportunities, overcome and learn from setbacks, and succeed in a variety of settings. And why is this entrepreneurial mindset important? It has 8 key characteristics that strongly align with those skill sets that we discussed in the very beginning of this. And those 8 characteristics are critical thinking and flexibility, adaptability, communication, collaboration, comfort with risk, initiative, self-reliance, future orientation, opportunity recognition, and of course, creativity and innovation. So in addition to the entrepreneurial mindset, entrepreneurial education teaches entrepreneurship, workforce competitiveness, grit, resiliency, leadership and networking, financial literacy, and general business acumen. And I've always loved this quote, so I really wanted to share. But the best entrepreneurs are made by teachers. The best innovators come from the classroom, where you learn how to raise money and solve problems. So how do we teach entrepreneurship education? At the EdVenture group, we like to teach it by slowly scaffolding. And we like to set at the beginning with that entrepreneurial mindset, and then kind of building up to behaviors where we're teaching that through design thinking, we're using empathy, and we're using that in our design for delight. And then we're using a tools such as like the lean canvas, the business model canvas, and then slowly building up to experiences. And those experiences can include things like competitions, pitching, actual prototyping, and getting to test your products, and so much more. So our learning objectives today are inspiration and identification, where we're going to kind of recognize passions and what we see as entrepreneurial seeds. Then we're going to talk about some case studies and success stories, which are always great and motivational examples for our students. And then we're going to talk about some simulated experiences where we can kind of use competition to spark that creativity. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some practical insights and scaling of really how we're going to take those hobbies and transform them into high growth ventures. So we're going to start off with our inspiration and identification. And this is kind of where we want to identify our own skills and passion areas, which sometimes when people are like, oh, like, what are your hobbies? What are your passions? We don't know what to say. But really, we know that educators are entrepreneurial. We know tons of them have side hustles, they have summer jobs, they do things like mentoring or coaching or even tutoring just throughout the school year. So we really want to kind of identify ways that we can help our students identify their own skills and passions. And to do that, we also need to kind of look within ourselves as well. But with your students, you can kind of use things like notice statements where it's like, oh, I noticed that you really enjoy discussing video games. Like, why is that? Why do you enjoy it? Have you ever considered maybe doing something, if it's video games, like streaming on Twitch or starting a YouTube and teaching other people about it? And then, of course, there's tons of additional resources such as aptitude tests and skills inventories that we can utilize as well. So how do we kind of turn passions into profits? Well, we also need to look at what people typically happen to do. So some hobbies that we've seen people very successfully turn into side hustles and profits and income with hobbies are photography, cooking, woodwork, crafting. I know like knitting and crocheting is super popular right now, but also gaming. And if you're streaming on Twitch, you can also make income. Interests include things like graphic design, coaching, blogging, event planning, and even different content creation we see as super popular online. And then skills, of course, include things like programming, language fluency, media management, fitness instruction, and even just general repairs are things that you can sell either to your neighbors, online, or other places to make a side profit. So if you guys are willing to participate in the chat, I would love to know some of your hobbies, passions, and interests. Try and pull up my chat box here. Ooh, baking bread. Okay, I am not good at that yet. I love to bake. I really do, but I have not figured out how to successfully get them to really rise in the oven well. Swimming, traveling, reading. See, these are all great hobbies. I actually recently picked up ceramics and beekeeping. So I have yet to turn those into side hustles, but eventually one day I would love to sell my mugs and sell honey and things like that. Yeah, these are great. So let's talk about a couple different success stories. So we always think about entrepreneurs as these unicorns, these people who had this idea and they turn it into like a multi-million, billion-dollar business. And those are things like Twitter or now X, which originally started off as a side project at it as a podcasting company. And then we see Amazon, which started off as an online bookstore out of Jeff Bezos' garage, where he would buy and thrift books and then sell them online to flip a profit, which we see flipping all the time as super popular. And then Instagram, which started off called Bourbon and was just a simple photo sharing app. but today we know and love it for so much more. So a couple other success stories that we really want to kind of pivot into are these, what I like to say are like local legends. These local legends are small town, small business success stories where we might not recognize it, but many restaurants, cafes, bakeries all started from somebody's culinary passion. Little boutiques that we see on the side of the road or in our main street are just full of different spaces with local artists designing all sorts of products. Maybe it's the honey, maybe it's soap, maybe it's candles, but they really are small businesses that finally have a place to be highlighted. And then, of course, the trades, where most mechanics or skilled workers like electricians and plumbers could open up their own service business. So how do we kind of focus and highlight these local talents within our small areas? Well, within schools, we love to bring them in as guest speakers. We love to kind of reach out to those local business owners and have them kind of share with us their entrepreneurial journey. How did they find this love? How did they end up launching this into a small business? And students all the time really enjoy getting to hear from all these local entrepreneurs and kind of, it builds that sense of community for them. But there's also the possibility of turning that into a job shadowing or volunteering, where you can have your students spend the day learning or maybe visiting different shops down Main Street and kind of getting to meet the local entrepreneurs, but also see them actually practice their passion. So maybe it's going to the local restaurant and getting to see them make the pizza from scratch and tossing the dough up and around. And then we also like to talk about passion matching, which is kind of facilitating those connections between local entrepreneurs and business owners that have passion areas aligned with your students. So we see this when we think about like our CTE schools, and we've got the students in the shops who absolutely love woodworking, but going to go and help out just for a day or shadow or learn all new types of tips or tricks or work with machineries that they don't necessarily have in their school are great ways to just kind of help promote and build their passions, but also connect them and help them meet new people within their community as mentors or resources or just new friends. So how do we help our students grow their businesses? Well, another favorite quote of mine is that the way to get started is to quit talking and start doing. And that's Walt Disney. And we know him. He is a famous entrepreneur who really has like built up that whole space of dreaming and doing. So one of my favorite things, and I might be a little biased here, but it's competitions. And I think this is a great way to help students grow their business because you can start from nothing. You can start from just simply trying to solve a problem. So business pitches provide students with platforms to showcase their entrepreneurial ideas, problem-solving skills, but also cultivate essential communication, presentation, critical thinking abilities, and even prepare them for future professional success if they have to do any sort of public speaking. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, I am an entrepreneur, and all throughout my undergrad, I participated in different state and nationwide competitions. And I found that love for public speaking, presenting, getting to really stand up there and kind of show the world what I've got, because you're not just investing in the idea, you're investing in the entrepreneur yourself. So right here, you see these students. They were actually in the West Virginia High School Business Plan competition last April. And they ended up winning funding, but they had created what they're holding there is their marshmallow catcher. And they identified the problem of when you're trying to make s'mores and you're roasting the marshmallow, oftentimes it'll get just too gooey and just fall off. And then it's lost into the flames. And you're down a marshmallow, nobody's happy, kids are screaming. So they decided to take that problem and turn it into a product. And they got to work with a bunch of different groups across the career and tech ed centers to create from like welding and woodwork to create and bring their prototype to life and then compete. And this year, that high school business plan competition has been modified into Spark West Virginia, which I am the coordinator of, so I'm a little biased here. But it's open to middle and high school students, and they really get to showcase their ideas. So a couple things when we're talking about competitions are to offer a few different considerations. So like we mentioned in the beginning here is that if students don't have a passion area or skill or hobby, you can always get them brainstorming by kind of asking them like, oh, like what's a problem that you see in your everyday life? What is a gap maybe in your community that you can help address? And I love seeing all of our Spark West Virginia responses because some of these students have had ideas forever and just no place to showcase or try to pursue them. And then others kind of, they took a step back and they said, hey, in my community, there are other students who go home on the weekends and they have nothing to eat. And they identified that as a problem and are currently creating solutions to try and address that. And like stuff like that just continues to inspire me, which is why I love like this entrepreneurship and education and having the ability to kind of connect with these students and show them that they have the chance to make a change. So kind of similar into there is that we want to kind of set those considerations and objectives and guidelines and also kind of break down the barriers and incentivize it. So maybe it's by offering help or mentorship, or if it's by, offering to connect students to others. And, like maybe they both have the same passion, or maybe one loves public speaking, but the other loves just getting to create the designs. And that partnership can grow into something awesome and beautiful and just, a great business within their local community, but it can also expand beyond their local community. So one of the things that we did to kind of remove a barrier is we took Spark West Virginia and we split it into two pathways. So we have our small businesses like creating bracelets that you could sell at a sandwich shop on the weekends or on Etsy, or maybe it's lawn maintenance or car repairs, and kind of putting those into our small business, brick and mortar companies. And then we have our big ideas. So for our students who are addressing a big problem that might need a bit more research or funding or a bit more support outside of their wheelhouse, they could have a place to thrive too. So you're not comparing the two, but you're giving each track their own mentorship styles. So moving into our practical insights and scaling, we want to start to look into how we're going to transform these hobbies that we've identified into high growth ventures. So there are a bunch of different scalable models that we're going to talk about of just like how to grow, how to expand, a couple resources there. But we also want to kind of take a step back and also look into the mentorship, what resources our students need before we even start to consider funding these businesses. So a typical business grows through the identification of either those skills or those problems or your talents or interests that you think, hey, like I really enjoy this. Like I love ceramics. It's very difficult. I'm not good yet, but it's something that I've identified as a passion of mine. And then we get into ideate, where we're going to research the business models, the platforms, or even legal requirements. So I might be like researching like, oh, where can I sell my handmade mugs? And maybe I can sell them on Etsy. Maybe I can start up a little Shopify website. Maybe I could just go to the farmer's market on weekends in the summer and set up a table. Things like that are going to be in more of our like research phase. And then we're going to decide we're going to build it. And this is going to be creating and testing prototypes. Maybe it's setting up a few pop-up shops, kind of seeing what the general buy-in is. And then you want to kind of identify your channels, your marketing. Are you going to start off on Facebook with friends and family? Do you want to pay to run ads elsewhere? And then, of course, we want to look at launching. And this is like our final step of we're going to launch our business and we're going to start making money. Everything's all set up and we are selling and turning that profit. So to talk about business scalability, we also want to talk about those business models. And this would be back in that build phase of understanding what works the best for us and our different businesses. So freelancing, we see either on like Fiverr or different websites where you can offer your skills and services on that project to project basis. Similarly is consulting, where you can provide your expertise or advice in a specific area at a specific time frame. So that can be things like we do education consulting on a contract basis. But freelancing, we could hire a graphic designer to come in and design a really cool logo for a program. And then we want to look at e-commerce, which is super popular right now, where people can sell their physical or digital products online. So maybe that's online tools or resources or designs, or maybe that's my own mugs that I'm selling on Etsy. Really popular right now is also this social media aspect of people partnering with brands and creating sponsored content and social media to kind of gain that following for paid promotion. So we see this with celebrities, we see this with smaller influencers. And I've even been into different classrooms just through work. And I've had students go oh, I'm going to go famous on TikTok, and then I'm going to start my own t-shirt company. And that's what I want in life. That's the career. And good for them for having that passion and being willing to chase it, especially at their young ages. But we also want to say, kind of in that social media category is the blogging or vlogging, which is generating that income through sponsored content, ads, affiliate marketing. That can be your Twitch streamers, your YouTubers, anything of those sorts. And then we've also seen a lot of students pursue event hosting, where maybe they're on a family farm and they really want to turn that into a pumpkin patch in the fall, or they want to host weddings in their old barn that they would love to renovate. So things like that can definitely relate to a hobby or a skill and be grown and scaled. So something that's kind of helpful before you pick your different business model is to have a bit of meaningful mentorship. So that meaningful mentorship we kind of look at as your social capital. So that's a significant value to entrepreneurs as it provides resources to us, such as support networks, opportunities that are kind of critical for meeting new people who might even be in the same space as us, who can kind of teach us a little bit about their business success and help us narrow down our path so that we can have similar success. And sometimes this is navigating the challenges. It's helping us to kind of learn a bit more from maybe their previous experiences or failures. And if they're oh, doing this was really hard, or I worked with this supplier before and I don't recommend, but this guy over here has been fantastic, always gets the deliveries on time. Things like that can just be huge for a startup, especially when we look at maybe our entrepreneurs who are starting this by just simple penny pinching and bootstrapping, and it's their life savings or anything of that sort. And then a couple of things we want to kind of identify as you're kind of looking for your mentor sources are that your local small business owners, maybe they're on the same street, they're on the main street, they're in the news, they're even on Etsy, anything of that sort. And then your local SBDC or SCORE, and even entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial support organizations. So that can be just within your entrepreneurial ecosystem, and those can be online groups that you join. Maybe it's on Facebook, it's on LinkedIn, anything of that sort. So a little bit more kind of towards our educators and our students is that school can be your social capital. You can utilize school as a selling platform because they've got newsletters, social posts, videos, announcements, even at times different funding opportunities throughout the community, and even highlighting, if there's competitions, different awards, which are just a great way to kind of recognize students and encourage their passions. So these different activities also engage the family, the local community members, getting to really put your students out there and let their passion shine. So how do we kind of get started, get our business rolling, and fund our hobbies? Well, as I mentioned earlier, this penny pinching is what we know as bootstrapping, which is using your personal savings or any sort of money that you've set aside or maybe slowly accumulated to create your business. And maybe that's oh, I'm just going to buy so much clay, and hopefully after I run out of all that clay, I'll be able to sell those mugs and then continue to fund my little venture. Sometimes it's crowdfunding when you use a platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and a bunch of random strangers can help pay for it and support your business before you really get it started. If you get to the point where you want to pursue more funding as a bigger payment all up front, you can look into bank loans, which might have different interest payments or potential collateral requirements. And if that's a little too far, then you can also look at family and friends to kind of seek any sort of funding, because maybe you have family who's willing to help support you for so and so amount, or maybe instead of financially, they would love to support you by just donating their time on the weekends to help you pack orders or anything like that. So when you scale that hobby into something bigger, we kind of look at that high growth funding. Our high growth funding is, something like small business grants, where you're seeking maybe government agencies, nonprofits, or private organizations support. And maybe that's non-repayable, maybe it's different funds through an educational program, but you could also kind of seek that support through those business incubators and accelerators. So those are more of the accelerator programs that maybe it's providing funding, but also mentorship and resources throughout like a class. And maybe that's access to get into a supportive entrepreneurial ecosystem where you're meeting other people within the same startup space. And maybe that's, the potential to grow and kind of expand those businesses. Other options are angel investors, where you can seek investment from individuals who would provide the capital in exchange for maybe equity, or maybe it would be a mentorship and industry connection and maybe not financial. You can also look into venture capital, where you're attracting different investment. Like when we think of this, we like to think of Shark Tank, and we see people like, oh, like I'm going to give you $225,000 for 20%, things of that nature. But again, like you really want to consider these steps once you're positive that your hobby is going to grow into something bigger and that you want to scale it into something and kind of give it your all. So to kind of bring up a few local success stories, these are just a couple that I absolutely love. Mason here at the top was a high school business planning competition winner in West Virginia 2 years ago, I believe. And he and his dad started off by creating just custom-made fishing lures and bait in their garage. And they loved it. It was a bonding activity. They created them, and then they'd use them fishing. And then all of a sudden, their buddies wanted some, and they would give them out for Christmas gifts. And then more and more people wanted them, and their demand got so high that they started to sell. So they entered the competition, Mason, and he ended up winning. And he used that prize funding to then buy different machinery and different molds so that he could create even more fishing lures faster. And that kind of increased his, his time so that he could lower his prices and then sell more. And then, don't tell anybody, but DJ's Rugs here is a semifinalist in the Spark West Virginia competition this year. And his applications have just blown me away, where Dylan custom designs and manufactures these rugs. And he does them all in his bedroom on a 2x4 wooden frame that he built. And he's got all these just beautiful designs that he sells on social media or around school. And he's applying because he wants prize money to buy a new, I forget what it's called, but it's like a rug gun where it shoots the different yarn and tulle through his frame so that he can make his rugs faster. And if he can make them faster, then he can lower his price point because he's not spending so much time on each individual rug. And just how much these students are learning about business and about how to calculate their time into their pricing is just phenomenal. So if you all feel like sharing, I would love to hear in the chat if you guys have started your own business or if you have a student who started a business, and kind of to tell me a little bit about what it was. Yep, Amber says that she's not a classroom teacher, but has mentored several of these programs. And she really has. Like, she has mentored with Mason. She's really gotten to see a lot of these businesses start from just an idea in the classroom to actually making money, going on Etsy, going viral on TikTok, and all sorts of growth like that.
I have the same as Amber there, but I just have a quick question about that, because we're talking about mentors and you mentioned mentors before. How do you help educators and also help folks in the community come together in a way that neither party is terrified of being, the business person coming back into the classroom, where especially in rural, well, maybe not especially, but everywhere, a lot of times entrepreneurs didn't have the best school experience. So just coming back, even though you might be this super successful restaurateur, you're coming back in this classroom and going, all those feelings come flooding back in. And then on the flip side, helping those educators find these people and engage with them in a way that works for the school and works for the community person.
Yeah, of course. It's definitely a huge hurdle to kind of begin to start to build all of those relationships. And sometimes you have to start out by, if you're in the classroom, it's reaching out to friends and family, because a lot of people have small businesses and maybe they don't even recognize it as such. For example, like my dad loves to repair old watches and he only works on Hamilton watches. But just through that like niche hobby, he's been able to monetize it. And through that, he's met tons and tons of people all over the world who have like an antique relic that they want restored. But a lot of the times in the classroom, when you have those friends, those family members, those neighbors, by just slowly getting to kind of build those connections, and even when we talked about taking your students outside of the classroom, taking them into their local communities, maybe on a field trip, maybe on some sort of job shadowing experience, getting them to kind of network and use their own interpersonal skills and build off of. Because I know we have many teachers say like, oh, like my students are so shy. They really hate participating in class. They hate, not being able to just kind of text in their response. Is kind of changing that environment for them. Even the change of scenery, the change of pace, or bringing in people who maybe aren't too scared to go into the classroom. And maybe I've known schools who have hosted different like career days, and they invite different parents to come in and talk about what their career is. And many of the times it's like, oh, this parent has their own restaurant, or this parent does this sort of consulting, or they do day trading, or, they have their own plumbing business and they've got their own truck. And it started off as just their dad taught them all sorts of stuff. They decided to pursue it. They started off by buying like their own truck, starting their own business, just them. And now they have a whole fleet. And really just kind of building those connections and allowing students to see that entrepreneurship can be trades. It can be all sorts of different paths, broadens the horizons just greatly for students who think, oh, like going to college is my only chance. And even then they're told, oh, pursue your education and not those passions, but they can do both. So I'm not positive that that kind of answers your question, but that's definitely one of our approaches on it.
Yeah, it does. I just that's a common thing with teachers. It's like, but that sounds great, but how do I get them? And then how do I get them to stay once they're engaged with the class? So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's all that relationship building too, which is not to say like a lost art, but it's that appreciation of somebody's time. It's having somebody kind of come into your classroom and maybe having your students write them thank you letters afterwards, so that like they know that their time was put to good use. Maybe they didn't spend it in their own business and maybe they had to close down the shop for the day, but they know that they are impacting those students' lives. They have those passions and they can see that like, oh, like this student, maybe they don't enjoy school, but they see somebody who might have dropped out or something like that, who's successful and impacting their local community. So just like there's little things like that that can really kind of grow and just create that connection for the students, but also the community members. Because maybe through meeting those students, they have a greater sense of, their impact in their local community and how important their business is on the young folk kind of growing up there.
Awesome.
But just to kind of wrap it up with a few final takeaways, entrepreneurial mindset really teaches those vital skills that we see, those communication, creativity, our problem solving, our kind of ability to pursue our passions and hobbies and kind of see them as more of just, maybe we see it as an outlet, but we can also see it as something that can be profitable, something that maybe, eventually we might dream of quitting whatever we're doing to pursue that thing that just we think about all the time. And it's that passion that could turn into our job. And people always say, like, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And it's very true. So we also love to use these kind of real world examples and resources that inspire students. And many times when we present stuff like this, or we talk about maybe some of our students who have won competitions and they're like, oh, like, I actually like to crochet, I like to knit. Like, oh, I love to build drones in my free time, or I have a 3D printer, but I never considered that I could sell all my cool little knickknacks that I print on Etsy or anything of the sort. And sometimes kind of hosting those competitions and highlighting the talents can bring in the community. It kind of promotes that creativity. And maybe, you know, you could have the student who loves graphic design and maybe they run into a business on their main street that could really use a new logo. They could use just like a refresh on their marketing. Things like that can be super helpful, especially when you see a lot of these local business owners kind of growing older, and maybe they could really benefit from having a super social media savvy student just help them out. So that kind of it helps out both parties right there. But, you know, a couple of resources that we mentioned today are Nifty, which was the entrepreneurial mindset, and they have all sorts of free templates and assessments. And then we didn't necessarily go into it, but Intuit has free online Design for Delight, is that D for D, courses for educators and students. And Design for Delight is a 3-step process for design thinking. So you're starting off with, you know, like your empathy mapping, you're trying to understand what problems exist. And then you're going to kind of brainstorm and go broad and then kind of narrow it back down. And then eventually you're going to test those ideas rapidly to see what works, what satisfies your customer, and what solves the problem in the most efficient way. But that is all for today. If you guys have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, you can unmute. And this is all of our social medias and my email if you guys would like to reach out in the future. But thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cameron. This was great. What a cool day. I mean, you know, you never know when you're going virtual, right? Like you're like, everyone doesn't like that V word. But what a cool group today. And Cameron, that was wonderful. And I'm going to shut up. I'm not closing. I'm going to let everybody ask questions if they want to. So y'all jump in there.
Thanks, Toy. Cam, I saw one come in the chat from Bob around the challenge. If they don't have an existing passion, like how do we help them identify their ideas? So could you talk a little bit about what we do with unnecessary inventions and design thinking and kind of how we start with that in addition to some of the small business focus areas, if you don't mind?
Yeah, of course. Now, as Amber mentioned, so we have, you can actually buy it on Amazon and online, but it's called Unnecessary Inventions, the game. And they have all these silly different prompts that are like, oh, like, you know, it's a hot summer day and you really want ice cream, but you hate when your ice cream cone melts all over your hand. Create something that solves this problem. And then you get your students kind of thinking outside of the box where it's like, okay, it's a silly little problem. What can I possibly create? And you're giving students just this free time, this kind of, you know, safe bubble where they can be creative. They can create different inventions. They can talk to maybe students they wouldn't necessarily talk to and brainstorm anything like big, wild. We like to see, you know, maybe they're creating a little robot that sits on their hand and wipes their hand all the time, or it's simply just a little plastic cup that holds the ice cream cone. And it's things like that where it's like, okay, we're not challenging our students to, you know, just cure the world of some big problem, but we're thinking of it as more as like, okay, like what's just a little bite that we could take? What's a little bit of innovation that kind of opens up the door of like, oh, like that wasn't so hard. I could create something. I could be creative. And a lot of times, like we hear like, oh, schools kill creativity. But there are so many ways that we can continue to encourage it and challenge our students to kind of be creative. And a lot of times, like there are students who say like, they don't have any passions. They have no interests. They don't enjoy anything. And I like to challenge that too with, as we talked about at the beginning, those like, I noticed statements. And it's like, oh, like I noticed you and your friends were talking a lot about basketball. Like, is that something you really enjoy? Is it the actual like activity of the sport? Is it maybe the camaraderie of being with your team? Do you really love the basketball shoes? And maybe they really love the basketball shoes and they're huge into them and they love collecting them. But, you know, like they can be expensive. So I've seen students who they create like a little trade group with their friends. And it's like, oh, like we're all the same size. So we're each going to buy a pair. And then every couple months, we're going to just switch. And then we all get to like, you know, we get to freshen up the fit, but it's not, you know, damaging anybody's wallets. And then all of a sudden it becomes a school-wide shoe swap thing where, I mean, that's just an example, but you know, that's a passion that they didn't even realize that they had. Or maybe it's they really love to help their parents in their family's restaurant, but they didn't realize that when they're coming up with those new recipes at home, that's something that they could actually bring to the menu. That's something that maybe they could start it off one Saturday and sell their new pastries and just kind of see how it goes. But just slowly like trying to identify all those different passions can really just change the scope for your students. Just having the ability to kind of sit down and let them know that like you see them. You see that they really enjoy wearing all this colorful, fun clay jewelry. And you say like, oh, like I love that. Like, you know, I would love a pair of earrings if you can make them. Like I'll pay you to make me these fun earrings that I can wear in class the next day. Anything like that. And it's like, oh, like I didn't know anybody actually saw what I create or appreciated how I like to spend my free time. Just like things as simple as that can really just change the scope and encourage your students like, oh, like I didn't know that, you know, somebody sees me, somebody appreciates this, that, you know, that niche little hobby where I find it as a stress reliever could be something impactful that other people could also value. But I think I rambled a little bit, but I think that answered it, Amber. But
Yes,
any other questions? Clearly, I love this topic.
Oh, that was great. And just asking, I love the idea of asking those kinds of questions. My middle schooler is into astronomy and started taking pictures through his telescope and was selling them for $7 a piece. Not even an actual printed picture, on a text message. Like he would send the I'm like, what?
That's crazy.
you can, yeah, I love that when you can sense the ones that have just like that natural entrepreneurial spirit. Like they're out there hustling people for pictures and text messages. Like,
But it's
I
true,
like
and there's so many
He didn't have any
websites that you can put
encouragement at
them
all.
it.
He hasn't been listening to these kinds of things for most of his life.
Yeah, he came out of the womb with an entrepreneurial educator, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, that was wonderful. And for those of you that spoke that are still on, thank you all.